All right, everyone, good evening. It's time for another Kame House lobby. Beginners are welcome. This is a US East Coast lobby, and we are standing outside of Kame House. Ring match first lobby 02 in US East 02. Today will be a little quieter than usual, less match analysis. More talking about some of the stuff that we've been hearing in the Twitterverse, stuff that we're understanding about the game, stuff that people are realizing that we didn't, as a general community thing, understand about the game. And some generalized stuff to cover what we have been covering for the last couple of weeks, in case it comes up through either spotting or just generally someone mentioning in chat or similar. Therefore, you can focus on the chat. Most of the conversation will be there if you have any questions based on anything that comes up in matches or in the last. Passcode for the room is 2717. Most of the talk this week has been about what we get off of sliding knockdowns and certain combos and juggles that are turning out to be a little bit more technical than the game's initial take seemed to suggest. So in order to demonstrate that, we'll be continuing to watch Omni Rabbit and Kanzuki Dynasty playing on Shift so that we can get a better idea of what exactly is in mind there. Sliding knockdowns are among this game's version of meaties because your opponent has a set timing at which they recover and get up from it, even though they don't necessarily have a set distance. You can use this to close in, and if you time things correctly, you can get certain things from it. But you have to understand really well, just as with meaties in other games, how to maximize that, and whether or not your character has a good sliding knockdown setup to use in the first place, or if you should go for something else based on the style of character you use. Omni Rabbit, of course, has characters who are very mix-up heavy, and therefore we'll be seeing some work on that from him this week.
俺様一人いれば十分だ。そこだ。調子に乗るな。そこだ。調子に宇宙の塵にしてやる。そんなバカな。貴様の相手はこの僕だ。貴様の相手はこの僕だ。マセンコ無産ぞ。どうしいい加減にしてくれたぞ。うい。
This week, therefore, we're going to be looking at which characters benefit from hard knockdowns, sliding knockdowns, and similar. Which characters don't, even though they actually do have those capacities. And which characters tend to take you out of situations where you can get a true mix-up, but you might be able to get some sort of reset. What we're seeing so far is that Adult Gohan obviously has some really good ones. Even if you do recover quickly, he's not really a character that you can get away from in the basic sense. He will get down onto the ground faster. He will be able to do a move that is basically a cross-up if timed correctly after that. And you won't have any hard push that you can do against him without meter of your own for invincible moves. His capacity is therefore kind of stressful for a lot of people, forcing them to use their meter or save their meter to stop him from doing these things. So let's look and see if we find any other characters other than Trunks, because we know for Trunks it's similar, that have similar capacity.
おじけづいたか。ドドンパーやついった行くぞせんまい行くわよワンツーバカめどうしたいったいったさあかかってくれ配球権甘い何もさてどうした地球ごと消えてたカメハメハ間に合ってカメハメハそろそろ死にたくなければ避けろ。さあやめるんだ。どうしたドドンパー皆さんぞせい行くぞ飛行法今度は俺が相手ですせい配球かドドンパーさあ終わらせてかかってきなとどめだバーリングマセイコすぐに終わらせてやるこれ以上好きにさせんぞこいつ
This match showed us a lot more potential in characters who have ways to get to the state that would lead to the heavy knockdown, but have attack vectors that allow them to combo off of it. You can generally hit the opponent when they're in that state. The question is how far away they are from you, and whether or not you can get anything off of that. In the case of Tenshinhan, he can just hit you with meter and get a good advantage setup after that, given the spacing that the character tends to use. Cell has a similar flow, but generally does not need to use as much meter to do it. This allows Cell to act as point while not worrying too much about hard knockdown setups and playing very strong or heavy neutral. Once this is done, there's really nothing to do but wait for your other final character to set up the situation for you, do a lot of damage with their meter, and then ping back out potentially if they got clipped or something, so that Cell can move back in and continue. And of course we got to see the cool cross beam technique between Tenshinhan and Teen Gohan.
This should be a great fight.
due to the spacings that some characters take up, whether or not they move in closer or are farther away at the end of their basic hard knockdown sequence can change a lot about the match. Cell Tien can stay further away, Trunks and Adult Gohan need to get close. As you can see, once Tenjinan has enough meter, the hard knockdown never really comes up. He just does massive damage as necessary. And since he has so much control over when that damage is done, and unlike most characters is relatively safe and still in control of the situation if he resets or drops his own combos, he can identify the situation in which he wants to actually bring the opponent down, or a situation in which that won't actually successfully happen, and just let them drop out, maybe call in his assists, maybe call in Chaozu, or maybe just do nothing because he's not at disadvantage yet. This is in contrast to Gohan and Trunks, who are at massive disadvantage once they fail to do those things. And the situation shifts relatively poorly at that point for them. Krillin is also one of those characters where if he drops his combo, he's in a terrible space because he doesn't have any air attacks to use. With Cell and Tenshinhan, at least in the general situation, you can be sure you'll get away with it. This is also something that is strongly afforded to Kid Buu, and to some extent, Vegeta in his blue form. Vegeta in his regular form generally must depend on his dive kick to get to follow up, but if he does not really have the option to drop a combo, all of his enders will leave him unsafe. Vegeta's characterization is actually similar to a Footsie's character in other games, but in order to be successful with this, he has to spend a lot more time in the air than on the ground. Opponents who cannot attack Vegeta well while he is moving around in the air are likely to suffer quite heavily because if they attempt to vanish, they will only get raw vanish and therefore he will be able to minimize the amount of damage he takes. And if they try to attack him from the front, in the air against an aerial opposing attack, this is where all of Vegeta's strengths come in. On the ground, the opponent is more likely to block and wait for him to do something. In the air, they can be less sure of what path he will actually take, and whether or not he will even attack at all. However, if they stay on the ground, they must deal with anything that he pushes on them. Complement this with the fact that he not only has meter, but can generally fake people out using it. And you get a character who can use various EX moves, high damage combos, and many other things from the air without putting himself at much, if any, risk. Unfortunately, he does not function as well on the ground, and certainly not in the ground defense. But he is good at putting the opponent relatively far away with nearly everything he does, relieving them with only the option of vanish to get in on him. As you'll notice at the end, as soon as Vegeta started attacking from the ground, the situation generally got worse. He's one of the few characters who can avoid most of the upward styled attacks of others by either stopping them or not going forward enough to get caught in them in the first place, while still presenting a serious threat. However, the cost of this is that he's not allowed to have many, if any, hard knockdowns from anything that don't come off his moves, and therefore have very specific setups that follow them. These very specific setups would then therefore be obvious and relatively well known to everyone else, and therefore make it so that your general aim would be to switch in another character, which makes him a difficult anchor to use unless the other characters have managed to leave him with a lot of meter to close out any remaining situations. If he can get in with the other characters in his team just weakened rather than defeated, he normally can stall long enough from his aerial position for his assists to recharge, and with correct timing, therefore get his full potential without having so much meter.
大丈夫ですか。やれるだけのことはやってみます。今度は俺が相手です。来てくれ。ゲロー全力で行くぞ。
And that brings us to the other thing that has been talked about on Twitter recently. Certain combos seem to be inconsistent for people, but not in the fact that if you have the exact same situation, the combo won't come out. It's in recognizing what counts as the exact same situation. This can be relatively difficult in this game at this time, and it might be a level thing. It might be difficult to always be sure. This is an important thing for many fighting game players. You have to understand as a player how comfortable you are with having things that are not consistent because of some other potential aspect of the scenario. Some players are good at and super comfortable in any form of scramble, and therefore they don't care at all what is actually happening. They are usually playing characters who can just counter something, or who they feel have a good way of dealing damage off of scramble situations. And just when they get into a bad situation, they just make a snap decision and go with their gut. Other types of players often need characters like Cell who are methodical in exactly where the opponent will be placed and generally not likely to miss or end up in a situation that they're unfamiliar with. As you can see, Vegeta does not take much damage as long as he's off the ground. He will still get clipped, but he won't usually die.
きますよ。これが俺の全力です。
Similarly, unfamiliar situations can be a boon to both players, but it's often to the player who is attacking at the time. This is partially what makes Kid Buu a strong character, because even though it would seem as if one is just spamming his aerial down ball roll, whatever you wish to call it, the difference is that Buu ends up in completely different places based on where he impacted you with that move. If he's directly over your head, he ends up at a different space than if he was in front of you. And if you got hit by the tail end, by the bounce up part after, whether or not you were in a block string at the time or not, and whether or not you were in the corner. The Buu player, over time, becomes more and more familiar with these situations and realizes when they can and cannot repeat the move to cause confusion to the opponent. The opponent, depending on their familiarity with Kid Buu, may be completely off guard by the fact that their opponent is repeating a move that, as far as they know, should be punishable. But can you punish it if you're not in the right space to punish correctly? And once again, unfortunately, launching the attack from the ground and being punished and dying. Overall, Teen Gohan has a similar setup to Vegeta, but is more focused around something else. Vegeta, once he gets an attack, can use the Vanish to extend his combo. As Anchor, he can use this, even though his other uses for meter are not as good. His EX moves and extensions from Vanish as a character make him very potent in that space. Teen Gohan has a similar capacity, but it works differently because Teen Gohan's strength is actually based around being able to punish with his EX moves nearly anything in the game. If your opponent fails an attack on Teen Gohan, even if they whiff from fairly far away, if your reactions are on point, he absolutely has an EX move that will get them. It can lead to massive damage if he has enough meter to extend off it. And he doesn't even need to use his level 3. He gets to keep on building up more meter as a result of these punishes because he can push people out and reposition them himself. Adult Gohan, on the other hand, does not really get much out of either his EX moves or his Vanish attacks.
ビッグバンそこだ目玉だ宇宙の塵にしてや
As you can see, because Vegeta's attack goes downward, he recovers differently and faster when he's coming down from the air with it. He is easily beaten by anything that will hit him, but since he never makes contact, there's no block stun to worry about, and it can throw some opponents off quite a lot. If you just block against him, the situation tends to shift very quickly. This makes for an interesting match between him and Teen Gohan because Teen Gohan's general demeanor is to block and wait for a really big punish, and Vegeta doesn't ever give that opportunity. Adult Gohan's strength, namely in escaping from things before they are going to hit him, is a massive trade-off when you are down to late characters, which is why he is not so good as Anchor, except for people who very specifically want to use his combo pressure in sparking. If you're playing him as a footsie character, just go for that. Teen Gohan's other strength is that he is incredibly self-sufficient once he has meter to start with. Using the meter you have to open your opponent up with this character means that you can often get them into Dragon Rush situations. This allows him to both rebuild his meter very quickly and control which of the opponents is actually on the screen. He can continually make sure that he's probably fighting the character he is most advantaged against, or if your opponent is also down to one character, simply has nearly infinite meter for many punishes into combos into Vanish. Once you have the timing correct for him doing Dragon Rush after Vanish, he basically becomes a battery and can keep his own offense up indefinitely, making the opponent much more hesitant to do certain things in neutral, and allowing him to stay quiet and defend himself for longer, given the situation that the opponent ends up in.
俺様一人いれば十分だ。ファイナルスペシャル。これで終わりだ。このそこだ、そこだ、そこだ。点数を出せ。
For footsie style characters like Adult Gohan and to some extent Tien, the thing that you need to use the most in order to understand their sliding knockdowns and to basically get as much off of knockdowns as possible is, instead of trying to open the opponent up with moves that approach them, do remember that you can hit their standing heavy and use the wall bounce, which will not turn out to be much damage, but you can go into the light aerial auto combo, which will normally spike the opponent back down without causing you to get too much height. When you don't have meter yet, or if your character's moves generally only work on the ground, this is a better option for you than actually trying to get air combos. Taking the opponent up into the air and then having no finisher is generally not in your best interest. Whereas, having extremely long heavy buttons in neutral is something you can leverage to get a ton of damage over time without the opponent being able to do a whole lot other than try to get entirely out of the way. Perfectly spaced versions of this against most characters who do not have strong advancing EX moves are almost completely safe in the sense that if you sense things are going to go badly, you can always cover yourself with an assist. Obviously for Kid Buu, this is done with his medium. As you can note, once Vegeta is able to get the opponent to think about the fact that he will attack from that neutral or forward jump, he also gains the ability to just jump forward. And depending on the spacing, the opponent will not be able to respond in time. Adding into this the capacity to just wait until he's getting further down and then super dash means that he really has a ton of options from the air that while the opponent can probably respond to them all, their specific response to each is usually different, forcing them to constantly be on edge as soon as Vegeta moves into the air at all. This is actually a great advantage because as soon as you have a character who can jump into the air and this action puts the opponent on the defensive, this character has a lot of potential in terms of playing neutral because they can avoid a lot of grounded attacks without giving their opponent the immediate impression that it is their turn to come forward.
It's all or nothing. fight is anybody's guess! Ready? Let's go!
どうした？なんの？しっかり飛ばすぞ！なんの？しっかり飛ばすぞ！どうした？いっぱい飛ばすぞ！紹介してくれ！
こいつはハンデだ。こんなものか。宇宙の塵にしてやる。この俺が本気を出すまでもない。大丈夫ですか？調子に乗るな。最後は結構だろ。俺が相手だ。自分の成果を見せてやる。貴様の相手はこの僕だ。ビッグバンそこだ。そこだ。そこだ。目玉だ。点数をつけるとすれば、今度は俺が相手です。そうなったにしないぞ。飛べ飛べ。点数をつけるとすれば30点ってところ。そこだ。貴様が俺の息子ならば誰にも負けることは許さん。これがスーパーサイヤ人ブルーだ。よーく覚えておくんだな。
This should be a great fight! Are you ready? Go! てやろう。さあかかってくる。終わらせてやる。バーニング。
大丈夫ですか？
許さんぞ。許さんぞ。
お願いします。
調子に乗るな。配球権。
大丈夫ですか？天津飯さん。
許さんぞ。くそ刺激。
しまった。
待って
そんな。
どうだ。さあかかってきな。
見えた。
大丈夫ですか？
そこか。そこか。
頼みます。
相手だ。
下がっている。
見えてるぞ。ほら見えてるぞ。
これから見せるのが本当の力だ。終わらせてやる。バーニング。
すぐに終わらせてやる。
許さんぞ。よっ。
無駄だ。
よっ。
おう。
おて。
行くぞ。まだまだ。
全体
よっ。
お遊びはこれまでだ。どうする。
許さんぞ。そっか。よっ。
スタートめ。どうした。おじけづいていくぞ。配球権。
There are two very important things about the spacing in this game that can make it feel unfamiliar to people who are used to games where the characters are often more grounded, and even to Marvel players. The first is that the height at which you did your move or ended your combo can directly influence whether or not you can continue it, especially on the ground. The second thing is that since grabs in this game all push forward, you no longer have a tell for when your opponent wants to do grab style mix-up pressure after a knockdown. Your opponent is able to stand further away from you where you could not necessarily clip them with your own attacks, while still being ready to charge in at you and launch a grab style attack of their own. This is generally a problem primarily because people are not used to needing to instantly jump out of opponent pressure on wake up. However, it will, for many characters, be the most effective thing. Just hold up.
どうしたおじけづいたどうだ行くぞ調子に乗るな選手交代だふざけやがってビッグバンビッグバン
無駄です見えてるぞ
こんなものかそこだ
せい見えてるぞこりゃ足だ
せんな人まれビッグバンビッグバン人まれそこだやろうそこだやろうせんなビッグバンそこだやろうせんなすぐに終わらせてやるささがちさらさら見えてカメハメハこの程度かファイナルステージこれで終わりだ逃がさんぞ落ちろバカめせいバカめアドだバカめどうださあ調子に乗るな逃がさんぞ落ちろ俺様一人いれば十分だビッグバンアタック点数をつけるとすればそこだそれやろう点数をつけるとすれば30点ってところだ
Once Vegeta has created the expectation that he will go into the air, it allows him to use all of his other attacks in standard Telepathies, because the opponent is not going to throw out certain things to just stop his basic approach. Now obviously I've been holding off on actually participating in this lounge today given the subject at hand. None of my characters are particularly good at hard knockdowns, and they're not particularly good at getting anything off them. What I can get from them, I basically covered last week. Their ability to jump and get attacks, cross-ups, or mix-ups after is effectively their version of knockdown pressure. Hard knockdowns from these characters is probably either a bad idea or not even available. But I'm going to play normally just to demonstrate that, and you can watch, if you're paying attention to that, what sorts of things normally result in hard knockdowns for other characters that don't seem to do so for Piccolo, 18, and Hit. Piccolo does have one or two, but these are generally either metered or slow.
Are you ready? Fight it out! 皆さん来い。
まだまだよっよっ
見せてみろ。こういう攻撃もある。
勝たせてもらうよ。食らえ今度は俺が相手だ。紹介できますか。驚いたよ。勝たせてもらうよ。まだまだ驚いたよ。黙ってきな。離さないぞ。行くよ17号。
分かった
まだまだ逃がさないぞ。そら見えた。黙ってきな。そらなんのいっぱい飛ばすぞ。とっておきだ。
ターゲットは俺が仕留める。見えてこれはどう。こちらだ。チャ
行くぞ。捕らえた。ピットだ。
マグル。
逃がさないぞ。
マグル。行くぞ。チャカと行くぞ。来るか。さて
自分の成果を見せてやる。
今度は俺が相手だ。覚悟はいいか。行くぞ。行くぞ。やるな。
なんの
覚悟はいいか。消えろ。行くぞ。覚悟はいいか。覚悟はいいか。行くぞ。
なんの
逃げ道はなくなったバトルボーイだ。たまれ。これから見せるのが本当の力だ。終わりだ。行くぞ。くそ。行くぞ。バカだ。覚悟はいいか。覚悟はいいか。
来ますよ。
バカンコー行くぞ。
終わらせてやる。
As you can see, even going for hard knockdowns on these characters just wastes a lot of their potential. The opponent ends up too far away with any of the standard things that would normally cause a hard knockdown on other characters. And if you push too hard on them, you won't end up focused on using your abilities to either fake out your opponent or set up ambiguous cross-up or setup situations. For my characters, there's basically no point whatsoever in actually pushing to land specific things on your opponent's knockdown other than mix-ups or jumps or long-range stuff of that nature. In the general flow, however, there are still ways to get some things off of what would otherwise be hard knockdowns. If you are willing to push the characters in ways that let you use moves that will pin down your opponent rather than moves that are intended to open up your opponent or actually get any mix-up.
Are you ready? Let's go! 覚悟はいいか。覚悟はいいか。大丈夫ですか。
生きてたのか。黙っときな。逃げたけど逃げてもいいよ。ふっ、それ加減が難しいんだよ。いや、黙っときな。もっとそれ加減が難しいんだよ。いや、黙っときな。どこ見てん。いや、まだ17人いい加減にしろ。
どうしたこうだバカめ見せてみろ。来るか。行くか。どうしたおじけづいてみろ。無駄だバカめ見せてみろ。調子に乗るな。こちらだ。調子に乗るな。生きた声どうだ。逃がさんぞ。
あいつ本当に強いよ。
ふざけるのいい加減にしろ。待って
大丈夫ですか。
逃がさんぞ。バカめ
こいつはどうだい。食らえ。
今の構えはこうだ。調子に乗るな。逃がさんぞ。バカめ行くぞ。聞こう見せてみろ。ほらい見せてみろ。
続きやんの。手を抜いているのか。加減が難しい。いや、黙っときな。まだるぞ。
これで終わりにしてやる。
驚いた。
ありがとうございました。いくら一緒に
Understanding how to make use of aerial resets, therefore,
お前を味方だとは思えない。
is important for characters who don't have a good hard knockdown stuff. You can either use true aerial resets, or you can aim to build up enough meter to actually vanish away from various situations and vanish into the air to clip your opponents when they are knocked out of things and recover in such a way that they end up over your head and floating. Without it, what you will get is what you saw just now, where your character is on the ground because they have done the air reset and failed, or even succeeded and the opponent just decided to delay their tech out. Delaying your tech out against characters who do not have hard knockdowns can be an extremely powerful tool against them. However, once those characters recognize that you're doing this and then start to use their own vanish attacks against it, as well as whatever counters they use or even deflect depending on who they're up against, you're back to the same situation where you have to put up with a lot of their stuff.
逃げるほどそう簡単にはいかんぞ。驚いたよ。
スピードには自信があるんだ。
逃げたきゃ逃げてもいいよ。逃げた手を抜いているのか。驚いたよ。惜しかったね。逃げたきゃ逃げてもいいよ。もっと楽しもうか。驚いたよ。
今の構えは俺は成長を続けている。抜けてみろ。止まれ。さて一発は防いでみろ。全体に動くな。ターゲット排除。急所は外した。しばらく目を覚まさないだろうがな。
So hopefully next week I'll be back with some setups from my side in terms of characters for anyone who plays characters similar to these who don't tend to have a lot of hard knockdowns or long extensions they can use. But let's continue to focus on characters who do have these or who do have good EX things that they can set up to go into specific attacks afterwards and don't have to reset.
Are you ready? Let's go! 遅い
As you saw demonstrated there, when he's in his regular Super Saiyan form, Vegeta's style of fighting is much more direct, and he tends to get much closer to the opponent. In this game, however, this is quite useful because he has invincible moves, and he has very good frame traps relative to most characters. He can, for example, hit light into stand heavy, as you saw there. And because it has pushed him out, and because of the way his hitbox and hurtbox work on his stand heavy, he can often clip people and get good combos off this. This means that generally, whereas in his blue form he's aiming to just hover in the air and keep on attacking in ways that the opponent can't be sure of, in his other form he's mostly trying to get closer to the opponent through the air, namely just jump forward or something similar, and then mix them up on the ground. He has a lot of safe jump setups and can use his down heavy, his crouch heavy in the air to avoid a lot of moves because it delays the timing he has for his landing. This means that you can use this to get out of situations where your opponent has something that will respond to what would otherwise be a safe jump from Vegeta. This team you're seeing being played here now, therefore, is actually powerful with Vegeta in that style. He can buy a lot of time to recharge his assists, and use those assists to get in situations where he might have otherwise been unsafe when he jumped.
ますます面白くなってきたぞ。甘い。
ミラクルスーパーパワー。
さあ逃がさんぞ。バカめ。せいまよしこして逃がさんぞ。待ってすぐに終わらせてやる。上手にバリーを調子に乗るな。行くぞ。バカめ。さて調子に乗るな。さあやめるんだ。見えた。せいぜい楽しませてくれよ。前の俺ドドンパ。すぐに終わらせてやる。行くぞ。さて防げない砕け無駄だ。さてどうしたかい。無駄だ。なしにならん。さてさどうした無駄だ。さてとそらでは諸君ごきげん。
Since Cell does not have a lot of specifically hard knockdowns, but a lot of situations in which his not so hard knockdowns give him pure advantage, he can be used to switch in whichever character you want, making him a powerful point character for people who do not specifically need to get their damage from Cell. He's not a specifically good damage character in terms of being able to chain into large things, but he can chip away at your opponent very effectively in neutral.
Time to begin the match. Ready? Let's go. さてスピードには自信があるんだ。さて無駄だ。
大丈夫ですか。いやまだまだ。いや大丈夫ですか。
任せたな。
いや
はい急だ。行くぞ。甘い。さあかかってきた。
うさぎぞ。お願いします。
見えた。行くぞ。落ちる。どうした。おじけづいた。逃がさんぞ。バカめ。死にたくなければ避けろ。
これで終わりです。修行の成果を見せてやるんですな。ファイトマスロ。どうだ。太陽剣。無駄です。なんの見えてるぞ。僕も加勢します。どうした。無駄です。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。
You should also note in terms of hard knockdowns that some characters are very effective at taking advantage of dash up instant jump mix-ups. Whereas normally the bait would be to block your opponent, auto combos in this game often mean that letting your opponent wake up with buttons and hitting you, or even with their level 3, which would generally tend to be unsafe in most other games, means you might still be in some stress because of the spacing or just the amount of damage you can get off of it raw. Whereas if you jump over some of them, you can decide whether or not you have a move that will pressure them more if they responded by simply blocking, or the ability to use Vanish to get out of certain level 3s regardless of where your opponent's position was on the screen. This allows you to do it even when you were dashing forward from relatively far away and realized at the last moment that you weren't necessarily going to reach in time. Simply hold up forward on the controller and go over their head, vanish if necessary, and it'll count as effectively a bait because most characters can't wake up and do anything about it. There are not a lot of auto-correcting wake-up reversal moves in this game at this time. One other thing you can do to buy yourself a lot of time in your training is to separate out your paths in your combos into basic A and B directions. When you want to go forward against an opponent and you have a decision to make at the point where the combo branches, it basically comes down to, do I have this assist available and do I have this meter available? In almost all cases, you use the assist when you don't have the meter, and when you do have the meter, you simply finish the meter combo. Assists that do not generally tend to work like this are special ones like Adult Gohan and Teen Gohan, and sometimes Hit and Majin Buu. The general purpose of an assist is to keep your opponent quiet or knock them away, but those characters are particularly good at flicking the opponent into the air or helping you to continue a combo that you are not sure was at the correct height or correct spacing to actually do the rest of it. You therefore have time to move into position or otherwise shift yourself and recognize the situation so that you can possibly work out another branch.
さてそこか状態できますか。この手でやるな。無駄だ。そこは譲ってやる。
この土ならいい栽培マンが育つぞ。
任せてください。それ目障りだ。目障りだ。無駄だ。死ね死ね死ね。動かしやがって。楽しませて。どうした？おて。貴様が相手。自分の成果を見せてやる。ちょっとは様になったかな。
Brace yourself for the coming battle!
地獄のような未来はもうたくさんだ。トランクス、私をがっかりさせないでくれる。
Are you ready?
受けてみろ。さてと。さて。交代できますか。どうした。上司に乗りやがって。
Counter!
ならいい栽培なんですよ。
ういまだまだ
難しいって。殺せるぜ。
うい
これから見せるのが本当の力だ。この攻撃から見切った。終わらせてやる。
人暴れしてやるか。邪魔だ。無駄だ。
出さないぞ。よっこいつだ。
スタバっちまえ。見えたぞ。邪魔だ。見えたぞ。邪魔だ。
どうだ。出さないぞ。どうだ。
これで終わりだ。消えてなくなれ。
まい。
これが俺の最高の
今度は俺が相手だ。
技。くだらん技だ。無駄だ。無駄だ。見えたぞ。この土ならいいさ。終わらせるぜ。
遅い。死ぬな。とどめだ。
人暴れしてやるか。終わらせるぜ。これが本領発揮のとこ。
これ以上好きにさせんぞ。お前はもう終わりだ。完全に切り裂いてしまえ。置けばやろう。そこか。
動かしやがって。この土ならいい栽培なんですよ。
せいぜい楽しませて。そこか。俺はスーパーベジータだ。
Vegeta! Win!
スーパーサイヤ人になれないサイヤ人など戦力にもならないな。
Alright then, I have gotten the vote from the team that we're closing it up for the night. That covers all of our absolute basic stuff about this game. We'll review anything requested whenever any beginner joins us, or if you have any questions in chat. So stop by next week for more Dragon Ball FighterZ action with the 2MK team. But for now, we're all gonna go join Master Roshi and probably get to sleep. Good night, everyone.